Turning now to our top story and the final Garnaut report, which has recommended a figure of $26 a tonne for carbon pollution. Just a short time ago, I was joined from Canberra by the Climate Change Minister, Greg Combet. Greg Combet, welcome to Lateline.
Thanks, Ali.
Is it fair to say that today you got the final building blocks for the carbon tax? You got the final Garnaut report and also the Productivity Commission report. Will they help clarify some of the issues still on the table?
Well, they're very important inputs for everyone's information in the Multi-Party Climate Change Committee. There's no doubt about that. And Professor Garnaut's report is a comprehensive piece of work. And yes, today the government's received the Productivity Commission report, although I haven't had a chance to have a look at it at this stage. And in the not too distant future, we're expecting the Treasury modelling as well. So they'll all be very important inputs to the policy development process.
Notwithstanding that you haven't read it, I will get to the Productivity Commission report a little later. But first to the Garnaut recommendations. In the past, of course, he is your chief advisor and you have accepted his previous recommendations, the structure you've chosen, the fixed price, then the ETS. Do you accept $26 a tonne as a good place to start?
Well, I think as Mr Windsor observed last night on the show, we're not going to negotiate the issues in public. We're having those discussions inside the Multi-Party Climate Change Committee room, and that'll continue to be the case. So, but Professor Garnaut's work is a very important piece of work that we'll be having strong regard to. But having said that, it doesn't mean that either the government or any of the other members of the committee, are going to accept or reject any particular element of it at this point in time. We'll take it into account because it is an important piece of work, but we'll continue our process to negotiate out a full carbon price package.
What about the breakdown in terms of compensation? Professor Garnaut recommends 55% to industry, 55% to householders, 35% to industry in the first 3 years, and the rest to innovation. That's very different to the CPRS, isn't it? Which didn't have anywhere near 10% for innovation.
Well, innovation's an important part of bringing a carbon price in particular, and I think what Professor Garnaut is referring to there is support that would be there essentially for business in their effort to drive innovation in research, through research and development of low emissions technologies and the like. As to all of those proportions, they're Professor Garnaut's point of view. Of course, there are many elements on the table, and I can assure you there seem to be quite a lot of competing demands coming from all sectors of the economy for some share of the carbon price revenue, and we're taking all that into account, but I wouldn't rely on Professor Garnaut's percentages or division of the revenue there as necessarily the case that would emerge from the Multi-Party Climate Change Committee, but they're very important considerations. What are the key things though, at the end of the day? Assisting households meet any price impact, and the government has indicated that at least half of the revenue would be used for that purpose. Obviously, we're extremely concerned to support the trade-exposed and emissions-intensive parts of the economy with a package that would support jobs and competitiveness, and we've got to make sure that we've got energy security and transformation in the energy sector, and to support innovation in particular so that we can head towards a clean energy future. They're the broad issues, of course, that we're keen to explore and keen to apply the carbon price revenue towards.
Well, in terms of principle, what about the argument that any compensation to householders should come via tax cuts? The point made by Professor Garnaut is that if you compensate directly, link your compensation to consumption, you reduce any incentive to reduce your consumption of energy. Is he right as a general principle?
Well, a lot of people have asked me this as I've been around the community, and in particular, why would we be applying an assistance package to households if in fact we want them to change their behaviour and reduce their energy consumption? And it's a fair enough question. However, the answer is that you've really got a choice. Once you've got some assistance from the government, whether it be through a pension increase or a tax cut or a direct payment or whatever option is adopted, you can use that to pay and meet any additional price impact that you might confront as a result of a carbon price, but you can also use it to reduce, to find energy efficiency in your home, for example, reduce your energy consumption and use that additional assistance for some other component of your expenditure.
So in other words, that is an argument.
Incentives remain.
That is an argument, though, not to link compensation directly to consumption.
No, it's an argument that household assistance is important, and it will not reduce the incentive to reduce your energy consumption.
You talk about compensating emissions-intensive industries, and you mentioned just recently, indeed, emissions-intensive coal mines. According to the Grattan Institute, most of those are highly valuable coking coal mines, and coking coal has had very big price increases lately, upwards of $100 a tonne, and the impact of a carbon tax is estimated to be $30, maybe even half that a tonne. So why would you compensate them?
Well, the latter number you just mentioned is not right. This is really an argument that I've been making to the coal mining companies, in fact, but nonetheless they've got quite a different view of things. There are a group of mines, not a large number, less than 30, amongst all of the coal mining operations across our economy that have high methane levels, and that is they emit large amounts of methane, and they have a material carbon price liability. And the government is having a look at that very carefully from the standpoint that it's that group from a public policy point of view we've got to be mindful of. Across the vast bulk of production in the coal mining industry, we don't believe that the carbon price is a specially material issue, but with a small group of mines it is, and so we're considering what form of assistance can be applied there, and it's particularly important to make sure that there's certainty, and for the people working in those particular operations that they are feeling confident about the future and their job security.
Another key recommendation today, and that was the one that there be 3 independent bodies to oversee the carbon scheme. Perhaps most significantly, the recommendation for an independent body to review the emission reduction targets and come up with future targets and caps. Should that sort of decision be in the hand of the hands of unelected officials, the point that Tony Abbott makes?
Yeah, well, Tony Abbott, as usual, is misrepresenting the position and willfully doing so. What Professor Garnaut has put in that respect is that there is an independent body that has a look at these issues, and I think some people might think it wouldn't be bad to get that issue out of the political realm. Professor Garnaut is suggesting so. It would certainly
help you, wouldn't it, get agreement around the multi-party climate change committee table if that was taken out of your hands?
Well, and I think we've got to look at what good public policy making might be, but what Professor Garnaut is suggesting that should involve is the establishment of an independent body to have a look at what the scheme caps, that is the emissions reductions that you would be aiming to achieve once you get to an emissions trading scheme, and to make recommendations to government so that there is proper democratic control of the implementation of that, and ultimately it's a matter for the Parliament through regulations and how they're dealt with through the parliamentary process to make the final decision about it. But it's a matter of just having people with appropriate expertise having a look at all of the issues, making recommendations to government. That's not a particularly exceptional issue, but of course in the scheme of this whole debate, Tony Abbott misrepresents just about absolutely everything and tries to mislead people.
It would also, though, wouldn't it, ensure politicians were accountable? Because if you chose not to take the recommendations under Professor Garnaut's plan, you would have to make a statement to Parliament very clearly explaining why you were not taking those recommendations.
Well, this is the process that obtains in the United Kingdom, and recently, only a week or two ago, we saw that the Conservative government in the UK received recommendations from a body like this, and of course it has an obligation to respond to them. It doesn't mean that government is bound by them, but it means you've got an obligation to respond to them and explain what your attitude is to them. And of course David Cameron, the Conservative Prime Minister in the UK, responded to them by adopting what is a significant emissions reduction objective to reduce the levels of pollution in the British economy by around 50% by the mid-2020s. And when it puts the lie to this argument that no one else is doing anything, that somehow Australia's on its own, the fact of the matter is, as Professor Garnaut has pointed out in his report, things are being done in many economies across the world, and we are hardly out there ahead of the pack.
But it also
we've got a responsibility to play our part.
It highlights, though, also that the minimum sign-up that the government has at the moment is a 5% reduction by 2020. Given the science, given what else is happening, given the rest of the world is moving, as you just said, what sort of a higher number is the government prepared to put on the table?
Well, we've had a target range out for quite a long time that's between 5 to up as high as a 25% cut by 2020 over the year 2000 levels of our pollution.
But are you getting close to 25% given all that other international action?
No, we're not. The government's still arguing that an unconditional cut of 5%, which is the same as the Coalition's position, by the way, is an appropriate place for our consideration of emissions reductions. And of course, with the passage of time since the last Parliament and the defeat of the emissions trading scheme in the last Parliament, time's ticking by, 2020 is getting closer, and we have to find a way to start the task.
We're almost out of time, but last night on this programme, Rob Oakeshott called your timetable to reach a resolution on this arbitrary and artificial. Will you meet your July deadline?
I'll be edging him along. I watched his interview last night, and look, there are a lot of very complex policy issues here that we've been working on for some months. As we indicated at the start of the interview, of course, there are a number of important other sources of information now coming in, and it's a lot to absorb, and I understand that, but the government's keen to bring that to a conclusion, and an agreed conclusion, in the foreseeable future. Well,
foreseeable future, I mean, I guess, does that mean July? Because at what point does a delay start to have implications for your proposed start date of July 2012?
Well, that's certainly a consideration, and I think the business community needs to know what the final package looks like. Householders need to know what assistance is available to them. And of course, we're keen to, as we've indicated publicly before, try and finalise this by early July.
Well, another point that was made last night by Tony Windsor, that he's very keen to look at the Productivity Commission report, and that really that is key to getting him to understand what other countries are doing and getting him across the line. Will that report, do you think, provide the apples to apples, oranges to oranges comparison that Tony Windsor is looking for?
Well, as I said before, I haven't had the chance to read it yet, so when I have, I'll be able to answer your question specifically. But it is a very important piece of work, I anticipate, and I know how much Mr Windsor in particular has been looking forward to seeing it, because he's seeking an insight from an independent body with the qualifications the Productivity Commission has to give him an idea of what is going on in other economies with which we trade, and in particular what implicit and explicit carbon prices there may be. And I'm sure that will inform his approach to these discussions to a significant degree.
Minister, many thanks for talking to Lateline tonight.
Thanks very much, Ali.